The 2026 FIFA World Cup was supposed to be a triumphant American moment. The biggest sporting spectacle on earth, finally arriving on North American soil after a 32-year absence, co-hosted across three nations in the world's most technologically sophisticated stadium infrastructure. The United States, Canada, and Mexico each received automatic berths in the historic 48-team field. No qualifying pressure, no playoff drama, no earned passage through continental competition. Three nations walked into the bracket on a silver platter of geopolitical diplomacy and FIFA backroom arrangements. But as the group stage now plays out, the stories these three hosts are telling could not be more different. And the most surprising story of all belongs to Canada. To understand how remarkable Canada's emergence has been, you need to appreciate where the country started. Canada qualified for the World Cup only twice before 2026 in 1986 and 2022, and had not won a single match or scored a single goal across either appearance, finishing those tournaments with 0 wins and 0 goals. This is the historical baseline against which everything Canada is doing in 2026 must be measured. Not merely one of the weaker hosts in tournament history, the weakest statistically of any nation entering a World Cup with any kind of prior experience. Even pre-armament performance modeling reflected this soberly. Canada entered the 2026 World Cup, ranked 29th globally with 1559 FIFA performance points, sitting alongside Australia and Algeria. Strong nations in their confederations, but not teams you would pick to advance deep in a 48-team bracket against quality opposition. The data saw Canada as an outside of the round of 16 team, and for good reason. Then came Vancouver, then came Jonathan David, then came history. Jonathan David's hat-trick propelled Canada to a historic 6-0 rout of Qatar at BC Place in Vancouver on June 18th. Not only Canada's first ever victory at a World Cup, but also a result that equaled the record margin of victory for a tournament host, matching the 6-goal wins for Italy in 1934, Brazil in 1950, and Argentina in 1978. Think about what it means to sit alongside those names. Italy under the fascist Mussolini era, Brazil in the Maracana, Argentina under the Junta of Videla. These are among the most mythologized moments in the tournament's near century of history. Canada, a nation that had never even scored a goal in prior World Cup appearances, equaled their record-winning margin as host in their very first World Cup victory as host. The symmetry of that is almost too dramatic to be real. The statistical portrait of the match, as compiled by OPTA analyst, reveals something beyond a comfortable victory against a reduced opponent. Canada made 97 touches in the attacking third against Qatar, 26 more than any other team in a World Cup match on record. That figure alone is staggering, 26 more than any team in recorded World Cup history. In a data environment where marginal improvements in metrics are celebrated as breakthroughs, this is a categorical outlier. Canada's 6 goals were the most ever scored in a FIFA World Cup match by a conquered nation, besting the 4 goals scored by Mexico in 1970 and the United States in 2026, and the most ever scored in a FIFA World Cup match by a nation from outside Europe or South America. Jonathan David was at the center of all of it. The Juventus striker became the first Canadian to score a hat-trick at the World Cup, and David's display combined ruthless finishing with intelligent movement. He punished lapses in concentration, found pockets between defenders, and converted chances with the kind of composure usually reserved for elite stages. The personal redemption arc around David adds another layer of narrative complexity to the result. David has endured a difficult season having struggled at Juventus, and he looked poor in the draw against Bosnia in Canada's opening match. The treble against Qatar served as a reminder of the striker who ripped through League One defenses while at Le. In tournament football, form within a competition often matters more than form leading into it. David reminded the world, and perhaps reminded himself, of precisely what he is capable of. David became the second player representing a CONCACAF nation to record a hat-trick in a FIFA World Cup match, joining Bert Patenow of the United States, whose treble came in 1930 SARS, a gap of 96 years. He also became the first Juventus player to record a hat-trick at the FIFA World Cup since Italy's Po Rossi against Brazil in 1982. He joined Lionel Messi as the only players to score 3 goals in a single match at this tournament. For a player frequently discussed more in terms of his club transfer drama than his international output, this is a statement of intent at the highest level. Coach Jesse Marsch was unambiguous in his assessment of the moment's magnitude. "No one will forget this, and no Canadian will forget this day," Marsch said, holding up 6 fingers as he walked off the field. It's an incredibly signal moment for everyone to understand that there's talent in this country, that there's mentality, that there's desire, that there's a lot of things that make this country special. That the Prime Minister himself, Mark Carney, was in attendance alongside FIFA President Gianni Infantino added a layer of national significance that transcended sport. Tactically, what Marsch's side executed was a sophisticated pressing blueprint. Canada's approach blended patient buildup with explosive forward bursts. The team's midfield control and willingness to overload wide areas created mismatches that Canada repeatedly exploited. When the fullbacks pushed high and the wingers inverted intelligently, David and his supporting attackers found clean sight lines to goal. From Northeastern University's Net Sport research team, which has been running data science analysis of the 2026 tournament, we know that Canada relied on crossing the ball from the wings into the scoring box and deployed long throws from the lower third toward and into the scoring box. A strategy that is becoming more common in international play and one that researcher Brennan Clean flagged as something opponents would need to prepare for. Slee Luren's contribution deserves particular note. It was Lauren who bundled home the opening goal after 15 minutes, pouncing on a rebound after David's fierce volley was parried by Qatari goalkeeper Mahmoud Abunatada. Lauren now has 2 goals in 2 matches at this tournament and appears to be David's ideal strike partner. Both are physical threats in the penalty area. Both make runs that stretch central defenders, and both finish with a coldness that elite forwards at any level would recognize. The shadow hanging over all of it was the serious leg injury suffered by midfielder Ismail Khan, carried off the field in the second half after a challenge from Qatar's Aim Madivo that drew an immediate red card. It wasn't an overwhelmingly celebratory mood at the end of the match because of Khan's serious injury after taking a tackle from behind. Yet, even from that dark moment, Canada found a positive. Nathan Celiba came off the bench as Ka's replacement and within minutes had curled a stunning free kick into the Qatar net, holding up Khan's shirt in celebration. The crowd came back into the game, lifting some of the somber mood that had overtaken BC Place after Khan's injury. Canada now have 4 points after 2 matches, sitting at top Group B on goal difference ahead of Switzerland, and they all but secured their place in the knockout stage ahead of their final group game against the Swiss. Canada know that 1 more point will see them finish top of Group B with their final group stage game coming against Switzerland on Wednesday. Finishing top of the group would mean a round of 32 game on home soil again in Vancouver, a city where Canada have now won their last 5 matches played, scoring 23 goals and conceding only 2. The statistical case for home advantage is real, measurable, and increasingly hard to discount. Against this backdrop of Canadian footballing euphoria, the picture across the border tells a fundamentally different story. One less about what is happening on the pitch and far more about what is happening in the corridors of political power and in the contested space between sport and government. The United States entered the tournament with measurably stronger footballing credentials. USA arrived at their home World Cup, ranked 15th globally with 1,682 FIFA performance points, a ranking that puts them ahead of Uruguay, Switzerland, and Japan, and within striking distance of Colombia and Italy, genuinely serious international footballing nations. The pre-ornament data analysis from Global Football Rankings described the USMNT as built across a generation of player development, finally paying off with a squad featuring Premier League regulars and Bundesliga starters battle-tested through competitive football. On the pitch, the United States opened with a strong performance. Northeastern's NetSci researchers noted that the data confirmed an impressive American display in their opener, though they cautioned that their next opponent, Australia's team speed, which powered a 2-0 victory over Turkey, would present a sharper test. Researcher Brennan Kleen said the USMNT's strategy and execution were impressive, calling it one of the best games I've ever seen a United States men's team play. The numbers were there to back it up, but whatever the American team accomplishes on the field is being filtered through a lens that has little to do with passing accuracy or expected goals. The political story engulfing the United States as host has grown louder with every passing day of the tournament. The finals come at a moment when Trump's political star is waning due to growing unpopularity at home and reverses overseas. A Data for Progress survey conducted June 5th to 7th, 2026, the final days before the tournament began, found that a majority of likely voters believe that the U.S.'s current immigration policies and recent raids have generally hurt the country's standing abroad, including 73% of Democrats, 59% of independents, and even 1 in 4 Republicans. These findings indicate that as the U.S. hosts the 2026 FIFA World Cup, voters do not expect the tournament to rehabilitate the country's global reputation. Trump's hardline immigration policies, which left some foreign fans feeling unwelcome in the United States, are overshadowing the countdown to opening games. The layers of disruption are both specific and systemic. Fans from 4 countries whose teams are in the World Cup, Haiti, Ivory Coast, Iran, and Senegal cannot attend because of Trump's refusal to even temporarily suspend those counts' travel bans. These are nations that qualified for the largest World Cup in history through genuine athletic merit, only to discover their own supporters are banned from entering the host nation to watch them compete. The competition's first week took place against the backdrop of negotiations between the Trump administration and Iran to end their conflict with Iran as a team in the World Cup playing on U.S. soil. Iran's players and coaches have found themselves under a microscope, particularly after they were forced to leave the United States after their first game without recovery time. Iran's team is training in Mexico, and team managers have said the extra travel could impact their performance on the pitch. This is not a hypothetical disadvantage. Long distance travel between matches compresses recovery windows, disrupts sleep regulation, and creates logistical complications that teams not in this situation do not face. It is a competitive imbalance created not by football but by geopolitics. Then there is the matter of the Somali referee. Just days before the tournament began, leading referee Omar Artan of Somalia was refused entry to the U.S., where he was scheduled to officiate in the coming weeks. The Department of Homeland Security blocked his entry for allegedly making contact with suspected terrorists. And some Democrats and immigration activists have voiced discomfort with ICE and DHS officials patrolling at World Cup matches. While the Trump administration has argued that people who are in the U.S. legally have nothing to worry about, Trump was brutally booed after showing up at an NBA Finals game in New York on Monday night ahead of the tournament. And his craving to co-opt others' success can overshadow the moment as evidenced when the U.S. hockey triumph over Canada in the final of the Winter Olympics this year turned a moment of national unity into political division after Trump and his FBI director Kash Patel inserted themselves into the team's victory celebrations. The FIFA Peace Prize given to Trump, the inaugural edition of an award that did not previously exist, represents the most pointed symbol of how the political and the sporting have become entangled. Infantino's award of an inaugural FIFA Peace Prize to Trump after his friend was passed over for the Nobel version now looks awkward after the president launched military strikes against another World Cup qualifying nation, Iran. FIFA's president, who had proclaimed political neutrality as a foundational principle of the organization, spent months at Mar-a-Lago, attended Trump's Gaza Peace Summit in Egypt, and effectively positioned himself as part of the MAGA orbit. The London School of Economics Analysis described this as walking into a political trap. As cited by the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, Alexander Cooley, the Trump administration really doesn't care about global public opinion, which leaves FIFA politically exposed, having so thoroughly aligned itself with a president whose international standing is declining. The contrast between the Canadian and American hosting experiences as they currently stand is analytically striking precisely because it reveals how much a host nation's image is shaped by forces that have nothing to do with the football itself. Canada arrives at this tournament with the cleanest possible political backdrop, a new prime minister and Mark Carney attending the match. A nation that recently asserted its sovereignty against American tariff pressure with unusual confidence, and a football team that is writing one of the most improbable origin stories in the tournament's history. David became the first player to score a hat trick for a host nation since 1966, the year England lifted the trophy at Wembley. 6 decades of host nation hat tricks, and it is a Canadian who finally repeats the feat. Social media has been filled during the first week of the tournament with online posts authored by visitors from Europe and around the world, marveling at the sheer size and sophistication of US stadiums, with one user writing, "You don't find stadiums like this anywhere else in the world than in the US." Americans don't just know tech and AI, they are also masters in entertainment and sports. The infrastructure is genuinely world-class. The logistical ambition of organizing a 48-team tournament across 3 nations with different legal systems, border regimes, and political climates is staggering. And the tournament, taken purely as a sporting spectacle, is delivering exactly the kind of drama that the expanded format promised. But the atmosphere around the US co-hosting is contaminated by the very political energy that Trump sought to harness. Through a mix of manufactured crises and an apparent desire to make every major event revolve around him, Trump managed to turn the World Cup into a fiasco. Because the disruptions are not happening in the background. They are shaping who can attend, how fans travel, what they pay, and in some cases, whether teams can fully participate at all. Mexico, the third co-host, sits somewhere between these two extremes. Mexico have now beaten South Korea and qualified for the knockout stages with their 2 wins, giving them an unassailable lead at the top of Group A, ending a 24-year wait to finish top of their World Cup group. The atmosphere at the Estadio Azteca and in Guadalajara has been electric. Guadalajara has overtaken Montevideo as the World Cup venue with the most number of games played, without a single goalless draw, having now hosted 19 games without one. Mexican football culture, its depth and passion, is being displayed to a global audience in precisely the way the co-hosting arrangement was designed to enable. Stepping back to the broadest analytical frame, what this tournament is revealing about its 3 North American hosts is a story about the relationship between political context and sporting narrative, and how the two can either amplify or undermine each other. Canada's story is being amplified at every turn because it arrives free of political baggage, powered by genuine underdog energy, and structured around one of the cleanest personal narratives in the tournament. A striker who had seemingly lost his way, rediscovering his form on the biggest stage in front of a nation that had waited 4 decades to score its first goal in a World Cup finals. With their tally against Qatar, Canada doubled the total number of goals they had in their entire World Cup history coming into the game. That single statistic captures the scale of the transformation underway. The United States story, meanwhile, is being complicated at every turn by an administration that wanted to use the tournament as political theater and is discovering instead that the theater is not always flattering. The finals come at a moment when Trump's political star is waning due to growing unpopularity at home and reverses overseas, And what was designed to be a triumphant recreation of American global prestige is producing a more complicated picture of a country that can build extraordinary stadiums, but cannot build the international goodwill required to make foreign fans feel welcome in them. The football itself, across all three host nations, is producing exactly the spectacle it promised. Canada sits on the brink of the knockout stage, carrying a six-goal performance that already belongs in the history books. The data, the records, the crowd noise at BC Place, the tears on the faces of players who grew up in a country where nobody believed this was possible. It is all real and it all happened. Whatever comes next, as Jesse Marsch said, no Canadian will forget this day, and increasingly, no one watching this tournament will forget it either.